Greetings, my name is Chamomile, and this is an exploration of the entire galaxy, sector by sector. Today, we're looking at the Ferra Sector in the 14th Red Tails Command of the Outer Rim. Geonosis, located in the nearby Arcanus sector, wasn't space-capable back when early Republic sectors like Arcanus first had their borders defined, and the Geonosian hives didn't show any obvious signs of sentient technology from the outside. When Geonosis got into space during the Old Republic era, their planet had already been defined as inside another sector. This was a point of tension all the way through to the Clone Wars when the Geonosians joined the Separatist cause, in part because they didn't like having their home planet represented by a senator appointed by the human aristocrats of the Arcanus Regency. The Republic did try to offer a compromise to the Geonosians back in the Old Republic days by making Ferra Sector a de facto Geonosian sector, since it had multiple Geonosian colony worlds. Ferra Sector is 2 sectors over from Geonosis, so it's close-ish, and there are some decent hyperspace routes connecting them, but it's not a surprise that this didn't really placate the Geonosians forever. Siding with the Separatists in the Clone Wars was a really bad idea in the long run, though. Several of the Outer Rim strongholds the Grand Army of the Republic besieged in the final year of the war were located in the Ferra Sector. Historical dramas mostly overlook this part of the war for a couple of reasons. Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Republic's 2 most photogenic heroes, never fought in the Ferra Sector. Planets on the Corellian run, like Christophsis and Ryloth, are better known and draw in eyeballs more easily, and also the Republic committed what are arguably war crimes in the intensity of the bombardment of these planets, even before the reorganization into the Galactic Empire. The New Republic gets to absolve itself of a lot of the crimes committed by Sheev Palpatine's regime, but they don't generally like to portray the Separatists as the heroes of the Clone Wars, even though the Republic answered to Palpatine for the entire duration of that war. So, the first and second battles of Geonosis are heroic Republic actions free of war crimes. No, using flamethrowers is not a war crime, that's completely made up. And the sterilization of Geonosis is an imperial atrocity that occurred years after the Republic was reorganized. The orbital bombardment of Separatist strongholds like Zorn and Hypori began months before the formal reorganization of the Republic into the Empire, though, which throws a bit of a monkey wrench into that narrative. Now, the devastation of Zorn and Hypori weren't as extreme as the total sterilization of a planet, but it did involve entire Geonosian hives being blasted into rubble. Geonosian hives were used as battle droid factories, but they were also cities full of civilians. The structure of a Geonosian hive being what it is, if you wanted to hit the battle droid factories, you have to go through every other level of the hive. And since the factories are built near the mining facilities and refineries, that way the metal doesn't have to be transported as far before it's used for droids, and since the mining levels are the very bottom, pretty much the entire hive has to be destroyed to disable the factories. In the Grand Army of the Republic's defense, storming a Geonosian hive is an absolute meat grinder, and the GAR was always horribly outnumbered and didn't have troops to spare fighting room by room through 100 different hive spires. The capital of the Ferra Sector was Hypori, which you might recognize from the 2D animated Clone Wars cartoon. I say recognize, this cartoon is infamous for its extremely loose adaptation of the historical events of the Clone Wars. Most infamously, the cartoon depicts the Battle of Dantooine as Mace Windu personally beating hundreds of super battle droids to destruction with his bare hands, while his clone army just kind of doesn't even show up. The Battle of Dantooine did happen, it did not happen like that. Likewise, the Battle of Hypori was a real thing, but other than the fact that it happened at all, I wouldn't trust the cartoon's depiction of it. I haven't even been able to verify if General Grievous or any of his Jedi opponents in this scene were even in that battle. Hypori got completely wrecked by the Grand Army of the Republic during the Outer Rim sieges, but legend has it that enough of the droid factories remained intact for the Zan Consortium to get their hands on some droidicas there, which they used in their conflict with the Hutts during the Imperial era. Zorn was also a Geonosian colony, but it didn't have the right soil conditions for the construction of a normal hive, so instead they made inverted hives, built purely underground. As you can imagine, this is a way bigger pain in the ass to build, but it turned out to be good for them in the long run because the Republic-turned-Empire wasn't able to totally obliterate the factories. They did catch the Trade Federation as they were picking up a fresh army of battle droids, so a bunch of those core ships got obliterated on their way back up to their rings in orbit, and now their hulks are just left lying around the surface of the planet. The Geonosians were completely wiped out, although I can't find any record of how. The rebels were able to find and reactivate entire droid factories in the underground remains of the inverted hive, though, so apparently there were few to no Geonosians left by the time they showed up. The Empire found the factory eventually and sent forces to clean it out, so now the planet is pretty much completely uninhabited again. They paid a hell of a price to seize the factory, though, and the rebels considered the battle a win overall, considering how lopsided the casualty ratios were. Republic sectors are traditionally the domain of a specific culture, a little mini-nation inside the greater federated government of the Galactic Republic. Ferra Sector was admitted to using that philosophy as the sector of the Geonosians, an ugly compromise that led embittered Geonosians to join the Confederacy of Independent Systems, get crushed, and ultimately the near-total annihilation of the Geonosian species by the tyrannical empire. A lot of Geonosians survived in the Ferra Sector on minor worlds like Mendevi and Gundil because those planets had lots of moons, Kakoan, and human inhabitants, which made the Empire less trigger-happy with orbital bombardments, especially against the humans. Plus, there were no Hive Queens or Hive Spires on these planets. So the Ferra Sector is still sort of the Geonosian domain, but all the Hive Queens have been dead for decades, and the last generation of Geonosians is dying off, which leaves Ferra Sector mostly empty. The population has gotten so small that the hive structure of the government has pretty much completely crumbled, and no one really knows what the New Republic is going to do with the place once the last Geonosian senator dies off, and there's not enough of them left to appoint a replacement. Probably they'll just convert the Ferra Sector into a regular democratic colonial sector like most of the rest of the ones in the Outer Rim, the ones that basically work like the Republic federal government but on a smaller scale, but no one wants to make official plans while the last of the Geonosians are still hanging on, you know. Your sterile, childless neighbors on their deathbed, it's kind of rude to talk about how their house will make a nice community center once they're gone. The Separatist promises to the Outer Rim were all lies, but planets like Geonosis had legitimate grievances with the Republic, and the reason why the Geonosians were such a focus of Imperial retribution was pure bad luck. The Empire guessed that the Geonosians would make for good industrialized forced labor, since they have a relatively limited sense of individuality to begin with. And the Empire guessed wrong because the Hive connections made the Geonosians very willing to rise up for the good of the colony, and the Geonosians had earned a reputation as a meat grinder mostly just as a result of the way their hives happened to be built with lots of narrow corridors that led to very bloody firefights. The Geonosians weren't much different from, say, the Celestins, but due to a string of unfortunate coincidences, they happened to be particularly disliked by the galaxy during the Clone Wars, and the Empire expected them to be easily enslaved and threw a genocidal temper tantrum when they were wrong. And now there's barely any of them left. Not a single Hive Queen has turned up anywhere in the galaxy. Even the ones who survived the initial sterilization were eventually hunted down by the Empire. So we're all just waiting for them to die off, helpless to do anything except tell their story.